What's going on, everybody? This is James Grandmaster Facts Boyce, and you are here for another Facts Project podcast. Today, once again, the return of Mr. Joseph Illidge. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thanks for having me back. Good to see you.
Absolutely. Great to see you as well. So we pretty much got a double header on our hands because obviously Bloodletter is now on trade paperback.
Yes.
And as well, we are at the forefront of the third installment of Noir is the New Black. They've been the original came out a few years back. This is the of course the Trade Paperback Anthology, and it's been coming out with seasons. And of course, Mr. Illidge here has a particular story involved called the Winterfields, and I would love to dive into this because I wanted to talk about this for some time. We just haven't. So thank you once again.
No, good to be here, and I love exploring different genres. My career is heavily steeped in the superhero genre, so I'm at this stage now with writing where I want to explore other genres, and the same way I was able to explore horror with Bloodletter for Todd McFarlane's Spawn universe, getting to create my own original intellectual property with ChrisCross. Doing that, Crime Noir was the one I had to do, and I love the Harlem Renaissance and what it meant for Black people, what it meant for music, culture, and art, what it meant for American history, and so it was fun to have a story during that period in our time.
Absolutely. And even due to the fact of, because it's almost like a transition of sorts, because it does begin with the Black Wall Street Tulsa massacre. And then it transitions into the Harlem Renaissance. Of course, 1920s. This is just after World War I, because our protagonist in this issue, Kane Winterfield, World War I veteran, who is returning to a discriminatory America, and he is given a gift in a young woman by the name of Delilah Wood, whose family suffered in the Black Wall Street massacre, and he is basically taking up onus to her protection.
That's right. Like you said, it starts in 1921. So you have this young girl named Delilah Wood, who at that time, she was 9, right? She was 10. And so there's a passage of 6 years. Her family, her mom and dad and their house got burned down, but they left Tulsa. They were not killed in the massacre, and they relocated to Harlem. And then what happens is 6 years later, in 1927, when Delilah Wood is a 16-year-old, she comes home one day and she finds her parents dead in the living room. And so she immediately runs, and with her parents dead, the person she runs to is her godfather, and her godfather turns out to be the famous W.E.B. Du Bois.
I thought that was fascinating, because when it was brought forth of who was basically, because he took it upon himself to be like, okay, I'm a good purveyor, but I'm not necessarily a protector. So he was taking the onus on Kane to be like, look, keep her safe. But there's this big secret that hasn't necessarily been revealed as to why her parents got killed and why they're essentially wanting to basically do away with that entire bloodline and take her out as well.
That's right. And so, like you said, Du Bois, cultured man, intelligent, founder of, like journalistic publications, co-founder of the NAACP, right? So the world of violence, that's one that he's not used to. That's not his world. And he knew that if someone had murdered Delilah's parents, they would be coming for her.
Yes.
So then, through connections, he makes contact with Kane Winterfield, who, as you said, is a World War I veteran, and he's a bodyguard. And he basically pays Kane, and he says, you're a father, protect my goddaughter as you would protect your own child. So he has a son, Carver, and Carver's about 12. And so they're the Winterfields. and they're a bodyguard duo,
Yeah.
and they protect people for money in Harlem, right? So now they have to protect Delilah Wood, knowing that there's a killer after her. So they need to draw him out so they can identify him and then stop him from killing her, right? So it's this real down and dirty crime noir story in the vein of Donald Goines and Jack Reacher and Walter Mosley, Dennis Lehane, the kind of crime stories that I just love. So really wanted to do that. And it was important to make a young girl the focus of the story, because with the Winterfields, it's a father and son.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, we really want to put a woman in there as a center of the story, and a 16-year-old girl who overcame the Tulsa massacre,
Yeah.
but then unfortunately suffered tragedy in her new home in Harlem, New York. You immediately are drawn into her. You immediately feel for her. And so that's the way into the story. It's not even necessarily through the Winterfields, but it's through the connection that you make with Delilah.
Understood. Now, obviously, with Kane being a veteran, a war veteran at that, how does Kane's military background affect the way that he navigates danger and morality?
I mean, he is a moral man. In terms of danger, he's always on alert, right? And he navigates through the world with a 360-degree awareness, right?
Yeah.
And, kind of like, I remember reading the autobiography of Malcolm X as told to Alex Haley, right? And while this is decades later, one of the things that I never forgot that spoke to Black men existing in America was Malcolm X said, never sit with your back to the door. So if you're in a restaurant, if you're in a public place, wherever the door is, the door should be an eye shot, because danger can come through that.
Right.
Right. So that's how Kane is. Kane has a 360-degree awareness of his environment at every time. And you see an example of him getting into a casual situation in this story. And so that's how he is. What else happened is, because he's raising his son by himself, and the story about what happened to his wife is a story for another day, but he really taught his son to be able to defend himself. So Carver is 12 years old, and he is exceptionally adept at fighting, brutal fighting, because even though it's the Harlem Renaissance, there was still racism, there was crime. I mean, there were Italian crime families, right, that helped make up the architecture, along with people like Stephanie St. Clair and her bodyguard Bumpy Johnson, right? And so it was a dangerous time. And so Carver is someone who is not having a normal childhood, is not having those normal relationships because of his life with his dad and the brutality that comes with that.
Yeah, you kind of see that like First On, because you could take it and kind of look at the shadowing of Kane basically coming back to a discriminatory America in the 1920s, but yet there's this other side of the coin where you're looking at Carver basically growing up as a young Black man in the 1920s, and how it's shaping as somebody who is growing up way too quickly.
Yes.
And
way too quickly in some ways and not enough in other ways.
Exactly. To where, he seems a little reserved towards certain things that are happening. And also even due to the fact, because he's been taught to just react quickly, think second. The logic is almost taken out of the equation. It's reaction, proaction.
Not only that, but when you're a bodyguard,
Mm-hmm.
you're going against the natural inclination. Our natural human inclination is to run away from danger.
Yeah.
They run into it.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a 12-year-old that runs into it. And listen, any parent will tell you, boys are daredevils.
Yeah.
Right? Jumping all over the place, jumping off of couches and stuff.
This is true.
Carver Winterfield is that times 3.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And he's not jumping off of couches. He's jumping into battle with men that are 50% taller than him and 100% more massive than him.
Mm.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now,
so that's his deal.
And that's definitely like how I would perceive it as far as like this father-son combo and how this is pretty much drawn out. I forgot to mention, and it's very important, that this anthology, of course, has been nominated for an Eisner,
yes.
Which is extremely important to the story. Obviously, I think I met Fabrice Sapolsky at Philly Fan Expo maybe around like 2 years ago, and that's where I first got to see this particular book for the first time, and I had the ability to pick it up. And the one big thing about this book is almost like, he kind of like, just like as far as the creative team, you guys take it and run with it. There's obviously so many creators that were involved with this. The original trade paperback had 46 creators and 16 stories. Then, of course,
that's right.
It dived off into these singular issues that you see behind me. And yes. It's still continuing almost in an e-zine like format to where it's still an anthology. And now it's going into its 3rd issue. Now, how important was it?
Right.
How important was it for one, because of the entrepreneurship of the 1920s and the Harlem Renaissance, for a story like this to be exclusively given to Black creators in comics, lettering, artwork, and writing, and coming up with these fantastic stories, and at their choosing, but yet also just given through the same dynamic of the genre itself.
Right. So, like you said, the first Noir is the New Black was an anthology graphic novel funded through Kickstarter, I think in 2020.
Yeah.
Earned $45,000, and the first printing of 5,000 copies sold out, which is basically unheard of for an independent publisher like Fairsquare Graphics, which is owned by Fabrice Sapolsky and Crystal Adams. And so Fabrice wanted to put out a reprint, but an expanded edition. Mm-hmm. So it had 2 additional stories, and it had some full-page illustrations. And so Fabrice came to me and said, would you like to do a 6-page story in the expanded edition? And I said, definitely. And then I really thought about, okay, what did I want this to be? And one thing I knew was that I wanted it to be something that had long narrative legs. I wanted it to be something that 6-page story would be memorable, so you would want to see those characters again, and those characters have a long story behind them. And so, I went to ChrisCross, who I've known in comics in my professional career since the Milestone days, because he was the artist of the Blood Syndicate series that launched from Milestone in 1993. And so I went to him and I said, hey, do you want to jam on this with me? We'll be co-creators because this is an original idea. It's an original intellectual property.
Yeah.
And so he took on that challenge. And so we did the first 6-page story introducing the Winterfields. And then Fabrice wanted to do what he called season 2 of Noirs and New Black. But as opposed to the graphic novel format, he wanted to do a 3-issue limited series, all issues funded through Kickstarter. And so one storyline continuing through all 3 issues is the Winterfields by myself and ChrisCross. The colorist for the first chapter is Andrew Dalhouse. The colorist for chapters 2 and 3 is DC Alonso. DC Alonso also colored Bloodletter, so there's
Mm-hmm.
a connection because when possible, I like to work with people that I trust and that
Mm-hmm.
I've had great experiences with.
Right.
And then the second story that runs through all 3 issues is called Little Rock Files, which is a crime story that takes place in Little Rock, Arkansas in the 1980s, created by writer Greg Burnham and artist Quinn McGowan.
Yeah.
And so there are other stories that pop up in different issues, but the Winterfields and Little Rock Files are the 2 constant serialized stories through all 3 issues.
Yeah.
So
I found that intriguing that basically both of your stories, yours and Greg's, were like the ones that were kind of like the spinoffs that ascended outside of the anthology.
No, listen, it's really great to have the opportunity to expand further on characters that you introduce in micro tales.
Mm-hmm.
And the 2 stories really fit with each other very well, right? The 1920s in Harlem, New York, the 1980s in Little Rock, Arkansas, the social conditions that
Mm-hmm.
contextualize both.
Yeah.
Right. So, and Quinn and Greg and myself and Cross, we just really get along so well. So being able to have stories in the same books was really just a lot of fun. And then Fabrice and the co-editor of Noir is the New Black is T.C. Harris. So they were the ones that came up with the Noir is the New Black idea and format. So those 2 co-edit the miniseries. And then, you just have those beautiful main covers. I just love the graphic design, the imagery that really gives you the feel of noir. The first one really makes you think of a gumshoe detective, someone in the vein of Walter Mosley's Easy Rawlins, right? The second one with the woman with the gun makes you think of blaxploitation films.
Oh yeah, Sheba Baby.
Like Cleopatra Jones, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, what spawned out of that, Marvel Comics Misty Knight.
Yeah.
Right? That would show up in the Netflix Marvel Universe shows. So I just love those kinds of graphics. And then for the 3rd issue is like a black man in a trench coat and a fedora, but it's a frontal shot. So issues 1 and 2 are profile shots, but the 3rd one is a frontal shot. And so I just love the format of these books, and working with a publisher like Fairsquare Graphics that will allow creators to tell their own stories. Is really important. And as you know, that's something that I really believe in, the empowerment of creators developing their own intellectual properties in comic books and graphic novels. So getting to do that, it's just a lot of fun. And it's me, walking the walk of the talk of my career.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, crime noir in comics doesn't really get touched enough. The one that a lot of people point to might be like Road to Perdition, which people don't even know that is a comic.
100%. A lot of people don't know Road to Perdition came from a graphic novel in the early part of the 21st century by Max Allan Collins and Richard Piers Rayner. Absolutely right.
Yeah, and even outside of that, one of the first black comics that was ever created was Ace Harlem.
That's right. Going back to all Negro comics in 1947.
Yeah.
So Noir and the New Black is kind of like, us reclaiming that, right? Reclaiming that from the days of all Negro comics. And again, you look at the work of Walter Mosley, Devil in a Blue Dress.
Yeah.
I remember reading that book. I finished reading that book the day that I saw the movie in the theater that night with Denzel Washington as Easy Rawlins, Don Cheadle as Mouse. Jennifer Beals was in the film,
Mm-hmm.
because I really wanted to walk in with the authentic knowledge of the book. And it's also a very interesting exercise to read the novel and then watch the cinematic translation and see the similarities and differences.
Now, with the arrival of the third season of Noir is the New Black, this is going to be the third and final installment of this particular story. And if that does happen, does that
Yes.
mean that the spinoff does continue itself with a brand new story of Kane and Carver?
That's a great question. So, yes, this third issue will complete this story and in total make a 48-page story. And the Kickstarter campaign, which launches June 10th, one of the tiers will be a collected edition hardcover of the Winterfields.
That's
right. So that's going to be a lot of fun, because in that way, it's going to be like a French graphic novel. French graphic novels can be 48 pages of story in one volume. So having it as a hardcover is going to be amazing. And so Cross and I have talked about what we're going to do next with the Winterfields, because the Winterfields isn't just Kane and Carver, right?
I wouldn't think
It's a
so.
family bloodline, which means we can go forward in time further into the 20th century, and we can go backwards to the 19th century if we so choose. So we're talking about what the next storyline is going to look like, and it's going to be a lot of fun. But whenever we do a Winterfield story, we always make sure that there's some pivotal history in it. So that way the story can act as a gateway for people to explore that history. So the same way the Tulsa Race Massacre was a significant factor in this story, in the originating 6-page story of the Winterfields, which took place in 1925, one of the things that we did was we had reference to the Cotton Club.
Okay.
And we let you know that the Cotton Club was a place where Black people were not welcome.
Yeah.
Only white patrons. The only Black people that were allowed in the Cotton Club
Entertainers
had to be dancers, and they had to have light complexions. Black people with medium or dark complexions were not allowed in the Cotton Club.
Some people said that was some people said that was one of the first places where the paper bag test was actually put.
100%.
Correct.
100%. So it's fun to have these characters against this real historic landscape. And now part of that means you have to do a lot of research. And these days, when you're talking about the internet, research isn't you find one entry and now you have your information. You need to have at least 3 sources that all align. Because if you don't get the time right, if you don't get the right year, if the components in the story don't make sense for that time, there are people who are going to see that and it's going to pull them out of the story and they're going to call you on it. So one of the things for the scripts for the Winterfields is I would do quite a bit of research and I would put images in the script for ChrisCross, like basically this gun, this car, things like that.
Right.
Because it really had to reflect what was possible in 1927.
Now, as far as noir, how does Black noir differ from traditional noir storytelling?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. You know, for me, what it is I feel like it's grittier. I feel like it's grittier because I feel like even when you're dealing with, you know, the Mickey Spillane, Mike Hammer, whether you're dealing with Casablanca, you know, that kind of crime noir, there's still this glamour to it.
Yeah.
Right? Even Dennis Lehane's work when he was writing about the earlier part of the 20th century, it was set against like the backdrop of Florida
Yeah.
and that kind of warm, exotic environment. And your protagonist is wearing like a linen suit,
Right, right, right.
bright colors and things like that. Whereas I feel like, you know, black crime noir is really down and dirty,
Mm-hmm.
right? When you're talking about the work of Goins, when you're talking about Richard Wright, when you're talking about Walter Mosley, you're talking about, again, black people existing in social environments in which they always have to be on guard,
Yeah.
or they have to create their own environments in which they can play safe. But in general, the world is hostile to them.
Correct.
You know what I
Definitely.
mean?
Yep.
And if you read, especially Walter Mosley's work, you get a sense of the survival capacity of people like Easy Rawlins, of people like Mouse, to be able to make it alive to the next day. What kind of brutality do you have to be capable of?
Yeah.
And so that to me is it. It's the sense of being on constant alert. It's
Mm-hmm.
the sense of a world that is always a hostile minefield for you.
Mm. Now, one thing I always thought was like, as far as like the differences, because if you're thinking about physical media, I would think the scores are always jazz, but I always thought that the scores would be a lot different. Even in reading some of these storylines, you could hear things sonically
Yes.
throughout some of these particular storylines,
Yes.
as to how they may differ. Also, uh, in this particular story in the Winterfields, I do see a lot of Mouse and Carver.
Yeah. Oh, listen. Absolutely. Because, one thing about Mouse, and he was played so well by Don Cheadle in the film, is Mouse is a short guy.
Mm-hmm.
Mouse is short and he's thin. So every time he goes out into the world, he's underestimated.
Mm-hmm.
Most people tower over him.
Mm-hmm.
And because of, you know, masculinity and how society programs men to be physical and aggressive,
Yeah.
he has expectation of combat every day,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so he has to be particularly ruthless, right? So definitely Carver is the same way. What Carver doesn't have is Mouse's worldly experience. Mouse has lived more life
Oh yeah.
than Carver. So again, Carver doesn't have a normal childhood. And you get a sense of that in a scene in the first issue of Noir's and New Black Season 2. There's a scene between him and Delilah,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where it's just them in this apartment. And you immediately get the sense that these two have two different levels of socialization,
Yeah.
right? And so part of the drama is putting Delilah Wood, who's basically had a good middle class cultured life, in the room with Carver Winterfield, who lives in a world of brutality, has had to survive
Mm-hmm.
by his wits, and his first instinct would be to pick up a bat before it would be to smell a rose, right?
Excellent. Excellent.
You
Now,
know,
outside of the themes, what themes of survival are pretty much central to this particular story?
I think that it comes down to family.
Mm-hmm.
That family is who you can trust the most,
Yeah.
right? And one of the things behind the Winterfields as well is, you know, there are a lot of paradigms that we still don't see in American comic books a lot.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is the father and son paradigm. and certainly the black father and son paradigm. And I think for a number of reasons, black fathers
Mm-hmm.
do not get enough credit. They do not get
True.
enough visibility as being good caretakers. And so, because I wasn't seeing this in American comic books, I decided that I wanted to put it there,
Mm-hmm.
to have a father and son story, right? And to show that kind of love and that kind of bond. And so the theme of being able to trust your blood,
Excellent.
that is at the core, right? And the theme of guardian
Mm-hmm.
and youth, right, goes from Carver and his dad to Delilah Wood and her godfather, Du Bois, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a parallel that happens in this story.
Oh, man. Now, also as well, when you're looking at those dynamics and how they're basically built about, especially with the Winterfields, you almost see, for the most part, where you were talking about earlier, how this story could pretty much be taken a lot further into how the Winterfields basically see themselves. If we're looking at what could the dynamic be for a Winterfields family in the late 90s, early 2000s, as opposed to how they are in the 1920s.
That's right. That's right. And hopefully we'll get there, right? I would love to be able to explore that. You know, it's very similar to how, you know, that brilliant ending of Ryan Coogler's Sinners, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you go into the 80s and it's that whole vibrant hip hop culture of the 80s. And your mind just starts racing like, oh my God, I could just imagine, you know, like Smoke, right? And his lady in 1980s America, right? So the idea of being able to explore the descendants of the Winterfields. I mean, listen, it's not impossible that Carver would still be alive. Now, he'd be an old man.
Yeah.
But he would be an old man who would have lived through the civil rights movement. And if you put him in the 80s, you're throwing him into the Reagan era, Iran-Contra, the CIA, you know, pumping weapons and drugs into inner cities, and him coming off of the music, right? The music from the 60s and the 70s. And, you know, you have your Nat King Cole, you have your Ike and Tina Turner. Like, he was there for the birth of Motown. He was there for the birth of Motown, and he was there for the rise and fall of the Black Panther movement. Right?
Yeah.
So if Carver makes it to the 80s, he will have experienced quite a bit. You know, does he have a kid or kids? Does the role reverse? Right? There's so many possibilities, and Cross and I have been talking about these things. But, you know, part of the great thing about these two as family is that family is a horizontal concept, right? Like ancestors and descendants.
Yeah.
And so we can explore the meaning of family horizontally through the decades.
And it's funny because I of course read Bitterroot, who was also basically brought into the Harlem Renaissance, and even took it a little bit further because their latest series that came out last year dove into pre-civil rights era 1960s.
That's right. That's right.
So they did a particular time jump, and it's always interesting to see culturally what those time jumps look like. Especially jumping from the 30s to the 60s, everything, that whole dynamic changed. It's only 30 years, but still the dynamic.
30 long years.
30
long years for us.
Yes.
For our ancestors, 30 long years. And, you know, part of the beauty and mystery of Bitterroot is that it exists in the horror realm,
Yeah.
right? Monsters, demons, different dimensions. Whereas the Winterfields, what I love about it is the Winterfields is so grounded and it doesn't have a lot of the things that people take for granted now, that
Hmm.
depending upon when you were born, you never knew a time without the internet, without cell phones,
Yeah.
right? You never knew a time when black people were starting to get jobs as porters on the trains,
Hmm.
right? There's all these experiences that an entire generation or two doesn't know,
Yeah.
that you can trace right back to the Harlem Renaissance, right? Definitely in music,
The
in
entrepreneurship.
art. Exactly.
Hmm.
The building of businesses, the amazing artwork of Jacob Lawrence, of course, the writings of Zora Neale Hurston, Langston Hughes, the aforementioned Du Bois, the philosophical conflict between Du Bois and Marcus Garvey, and
Hmm.
Marcus Garvey introducing the idea basically to like American black people of nationalism, right? Like
Hmm.
global nationalism, you know, and how he was seen. Marcus Garvey Jr. was seen as insane for
Hmm.
that he was talking crazy. Obviously, he was ahead of the curve, right? And so there are so many things that come out of the Harlem Renaissance, out of that period in the 20s before the stock market crash of 1929.
Hmm.
Because what happened is with the Harlem Renaissance, there were a lot of patrons. There were wealthy people who were patrons of the arts and helped fund creatives to do their work. When the
Right.
stock market crash of 1929 happened, they weren't doing that anymore.
Right.
That was considered luxury expense.
Mm.
And they were not putting their money towards that patronage anymore. So that totally upended the black creative movement of the Harlem Renaissance.
Mm. Damn. Now, when we're talking about culturally outside of the Winterfelds, of course, you created just last year this storyline Bloodletter for Image Comics, and
Yes.
introduced us to a brand new character within Spawn's universe. Of course, Tasha Thornwall.
Yes.
Now, given the cultural aspects that you just talked about in the Winterfelds, you introduced a lot of Louisiana Creole culture to Tasha in this particular book. If you could talk about it briefly again, about what basically sets her apart as this new addition in Spawn's universe.
So, Tasha Thornwall is an ex CIA agent. And what happened was she was part of this operation for a year where she was part of a team, and they were assigned to protect a Haitian politician in Port-au-Prince who was running to become the next leader of Haiti.
Mm-hmm.
And so Tasha had been undercover with him for a year. She fell in love with him. And what happened was the United States government
Yeah.
did a pivot and they said, you know what? It's no longer in the United States' interest that this guy becomes the leader of Haiti. You're to walk away and let him get killed so that the guy who's still there, Toussaint, can stay in power. We need him in power. And Tasha and her team were like, no,
Mm.
like, we're not going to just walk away and let this guy get killed by his rival. And we do think he is best for the future of Haiti. So they were going to extract him and go
Yeah.
into hiding. And then what happened is Todd McFarlane's Spawn character, who in an earlier life was Al Simmons, and Al Simmons is basically the John Wick of the Spawn universe. He's the guy that you sent in scorch earth, kill everybody, leave.
Mm-hmm.
He wipes Tasha's team out. She barely escapes. So what Al does is he exposes her publicly. He reveals to everyone in Haiti that Tasha Thornwall is a CIA agent that was planted there to live among them. So now she's on the run.
Yeah.
She's on the run from the Haitian government, the side that was in power. She's on the run from the CIA because she's considered a traitor because she went against orders.
Mm-hmm.
And so she goes underground, and the Spawn universe is full of angels and demons and all these creatures in between.
Yeah.
So while Tasha was living underground, she had to learn magic to survive. Right? And so she becomes a mystic. And then 10 years later, which is the present day, she is a legendary mystic known throughout the world as Bloodletter. She's a myth. Some people have seen her, some people have not. And she finds out that Al Simmons is alive and now he's Spawn.
Right.
And she wants to kill him because he destroyed her life.
Yeah.
So Bloodletter is the revenge mission of Tasha Thornwall to kill Spawn. And to your point about culture, when you're operating in an intellectual property universe that is owned by somebody else, in this case, Todd McFarlane Productions, what you want to do is you want to add something that it doesn't have. So when co-writer Tim Seeley and I were thinking about it, we said, well, what does a Spawn universe not have? It doesn't have a John Constantine. It doesn't have like a street mystic.
Yeah.
Right. So we said, okay. And when we came up with Tasha, I came up with her Haitian heritage and Tim came up with her South American heritage. And so Tasha, in my mind, was born in Brooklyn in the Flatbush neighborhood, which has a rich Haitian community. And so, we don't really get into her super backstory, but basically, in my mind, 9/11 happened and it changed everything. And she decided that she had to be of service.
Right.
And so that's when she joined the military and she was pulled into the Central Intelligence Agency. So she was a patriot through and through. And after what happened in her go up against Al Simmons, she learned that she could not trust the government. She learned that she was expendable, and she learned that the only person that she could trust is herself.
Right.
Which is totally different than the Winterfields. The Winterfields, Kane and Carver have one another. Tasha has nobody.
No one. Yeah.
Right. And that's a different kind of survival story, especially when she has suffered terrible trauma.
Absolutely. One of the bigger things that I think it revealed to many people who probably have read the Spawn comics for years, it revealed about Al Simmons, his prior life, as to how much he took in order to win. Like he would turn against his own people if it meant the W for the day.
Yes, listen, because at that time his position is that he was a soldier. Right? And nothing else factored. He was given a mission. The mission had to be executed. Right? That was his thing. He defined himself that way. He defined himself by his authority as the last resort cleaner of the United States government. And so clashing him and Tasha is clashing someone who at that time was still a patriot, but at this particular moment decided to go against orders because she felt like morality was more important than orders. Coming up against Al Simmons, for which orders and morality are one and the same.
Right.
There is no conflict with the order. Right. And so that is part of what governments do. Governments put people at odds with one another who in different situations would be standing alongside each other. Right. Sure. And so that's one of the things that we wanted to show in the story. And Tasha's background comes into play when she meets Spawn because she starts really taking him on with Creole magic, like Creole sorcery, which is something he does not understand, but something that she very well understands.
It's true because what is it, the tattooing that basically, or better yet, the scarring that is based throughout her body is basically her training, her dark magic training, going throughout the course of many years, and it is basically all her training is written all over her body.
That's right. The source of how she accesses magic is through her tattoos and scars, and a variety of them are also protection sigils because she's going to be coming up against a lot of different entities and she needs to be ready for them. So one way to deal with magic is to call upon forces in the cosmos or powers from other deities from other dimensions, right? But another way is to create the access ways on your body, right? So that means whenever you're walking around, you have kind of like this certain mystical armor about you, right? But yes, you see literally the scars all over her. They're not just psychic, they're physical, you know? But again, that's who she has become in those 10 years. That's what survival looks like when you're in a world where the most unimaginable horrors are very real.
Yeah, definitely. And even in her hunt of Spawn, how does Tasha examine the difference between justice and revenge? You know, at the end of the day, she wants to just end him.
Yeah. So, at the core of Bloodletter is the theme of what does it take to fill the hole of trauma? Can you fill it?
Yeah.
Right. And so her revenge is a white hot thing burning in her mind. And anything that is between her and Spawn will get run over. Right. And sometimes that's going to include ethics.
Right.
She will run it over because nothing is going to get in between her and getting her justice on this guy.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's really the story. It's a fast paced story with urgency. You get a window into the secret history of the Spawn universe. And as much as I love the single issue format, and it's a 5-act story. It's 5 issues. It's 5 acts. It's very episodic. You could come in at any point, but if you were there from the beginning, you get a real ride. As much as I love that experience, there's something very cool about the entire story being in one book.
Yeah,
right.
Sure.
And a whole new set of fans, people who like their stories in one installment and just want to sit in their living room and go through the whole thing and don't want to go through the Wednesday Warrior culture of waiting month to month to see what's next. Now Bloodletter is in that volume for them, and I love it. I love it that it can be on people's bookshelves. I love that a whole new group of people are going to discover Tasha's story. And, Tim Seeley and I really put a lot into her story. Artist Christian Rosado, colorist DC Alonso. We just really loved it.
Now, as far as like the creative design of basically bringing Tasha to life,
Yes.
what did Christian basically bring to the series that elevated the material beyond what was on the page, as far as the creation of Tasha?
So what happens is, when you have the right artist and he gets in your head, when he visualizes the character, that's it, right? So for the first 2 to 3 issues, Tim and I were writing Tasha, and we did not have the design yet. We created a mood board and the mood board had different references from different actresses, different models, different people, different types of fashion, because we wanted Tasha Thornwall, the Bloodletter, to be a character
Yeah.
who could stand alongside the other characters in the Spawn universe, but also to be a toyetic character. Because Todd McFarlane, in addition to being a comic book legend and one of the co-founders of Image, is an entrepreneur, and he's known for his toy company, Todd Toys, which makes highest standard action figures.
Yeah.
So the Spawn universe has been translated into so many action figures. If that happens with Tasha, we wanted her to be able to hang. And so Christian took all of the reference that we gave him, and then he mixed in his own things, and he brought other qualities to her. And when we saw the first design, which was one full body shot and one headshot, we were like, that's her.
Yeah.
That
Now,
that
also,
is her.
that for sure, and in even what we talked about earlier, where you and Tim basically brought forth the two cultural aspects of it. One, her
Yes.
being from Brooklyn. Two, her being of Haitian descent. Three, her also being of South American descent, and
Yes.
all basically warped into this one particular person. Now,
Yes.
how does Tasha, do you say, contribute into the, I'm going to say, the evolving landscape of Black female protagonists in comics?
So years ago, I was on a panel at, I think it was New York Book Festival. It wasn't a Comic Con, it was like a book con. And
Okay.
I was on a panel with Marjorie Liu, who's a well-known graphic novel writer. She has an entire series called Monstrous.
Mm-hmm.
And Magdalene Visaggio, who's written for DC, written for all the top companies, and I believe Mags's most popular comic book series was called Kim and Kim. And it was moderated, I believe, by journalist Heidi McDonald. And one of the things that Marjorie said about women characters in comics, and I never forgot that, is that she felt like the patriarchy of comics basically wanted women to be either the saint or the whore, right?
True.
Either the person of perfect morals like Wonder Woman,
Mm-hmm.
or the person to basically be the female object of desire for a male character.
Mm-hmm.
But that in between those two polar opposites was so much complexity.
Mm-hmm.
And that comics needed more women with layers and complexity.
Yeah.
And so Tasha's in the in-between. Tasha is complex. Tasha has parts of her that are messy, that are not heroic,
Yeah.
right? But she has been through a life that shapes who she is, that shapes her worldview. And it's a very cynical worldview,
For sure.
right? Made more so when she learns that Al Simmons is alive and she decides she's going to take him out.
Mm.
So then basically, then any vestige of a code that she may have had, that's out, right? And so that's who Tasha is. Tasha is in the in-between, right? Like, she is, in her mind, justified for every action that she takes.
Mm.
For the reader, chapter by chapter, you're going to shift your opinion a number of times,
It's true.
right?
True.
And that's it.
And even in that, well, I'm going to say in that final issue, but we're talking about the trade paperback,
Yes.
that final confrontation with
Yes.
Spawn, it all comes to a
Yes.
head, and it's not what you think.
100%. It's funny because I was interviewed, and the interviewer had been with Bloodletter since the very beginning. And one of the things that they said is they thought the battle with Spawn was going to be the last chapter?
Mm-hmm.
And why was it the penultimate chapter and not the ultimate chapter?
Mm-hmm.
And when you read the story, you know why.
Right.
Right? Because that's not Tasha's ultimate battle. Tasha's ultimate battle, we won't reveal here. You have to read the book
Mm-hmm.
to know what the real personal reckoning she needs to have with herself is. And the narration of the story is a letter that Tasha is writing to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And in the last 2 pages of the last chapter, you find out who she's writing this letter to. And in her very last sentences, you understand what her real arc was.
Yep.
And the arc is...
Hence the title, Bloodletter.
Yes, absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Which I thought brought it all full circle, but I was like, there we go.
100%. Listen, we were all very proud of that story and the way it did come together. I feel like it's the kind of story where if you read it from the very beginning, you'll get to the last page and it could compel you to go right back to the beginning.
Yep.
And start all over again. It really is a circle.
Yeah.
Right. And, listen, it's all hard. Writing is difficult. Writing is fun, but writing is also a lot of work. Mm-hmm. And if you manage to get anywhere near close to pulling off the intent, mm-hmm. you're blessed. So Tim and I came pretty close.
Yeah, I think you did absolutely phenomenal.
We came pretty close. And so that is something that we hope, readers will get out of it. And that's one of the reasons why, again, I'm happy it's a book, because it'll give me the opportunity to meet new people and have them experience Tasha in this way. And I'm that person sometimes where, on a Sunday morning, I like to sit in my living room and just read a trade paperback.
Yep.
Just like leave me alone for 3 to 4 hours and let me just have this quiet time in which I can read, because I love to read, but I have to eke out these pockets of time to read because of my busy life.
True. And I think the access of the Spawn universe has definitely done that. Obviously, as new as maybe around like a couple months ago, Todd McFarlane actually passed over the reins to Matthew Rosenberg.
Yes, he did.
So the Spawn universe, of course, is going through all these changes. Like in the past few years, obviously it's expanded. Writers like you taking on Bloodletter, introducing newer characters to the Spawn universe. That's happened a few times over the past few years. Gail Simone taking over She-Spawn and everything like that.
Yes.
So there's been a lot of things happening within the Spawn universe. And it doesn't necessarily mean that Todd McFarlane doesn't necessarily have the finger on the pulse, or yet y'all wouldn't have had those conversations.
It was really great when Tim and I and the editor-in-chief of Todd McFarlane Productions, Thomas Healy, and Todd McFarlane had this 1-hour Zoom call.
Yeah.
It was absolutely surreal, but hearing from Todd's own lips, hearing him talk about the Spawn universe and the rules and the characters, you just understood that he had a total grasp of it. He understands this universe that he has created, and it is very interesting seeing him now pull back and pass the reins to somebody else and take on this new stage of his life in which he is still very much an artist and an entrepreneur, but he's not writing the main Spawn titles on a daily basis. But that's part of when you build an empire, right? And the empire scales.
Yeah.
Eventually, you can't run it on a day-to-day basis. There's the 10,000 foot view, but he's kind of like at the 30,000 foot view now, right? And you create something and you have the right people that you can trust and you let them run it on the day-to-day basis. And then you do the check-ins with them.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I definitely say that.
That's what he has pulled off. And God bless him. He's an example and an inspiration. My my life as a solopreneur, my creative and business aspirations in comic books has a straight line to the thought processes of Todd McFarlane.
Yeah. Somebody who, of course, rebelled against the mainstream,
Yes, he did.
created his own company,
Yep.
almost in the same realm that you saw that you dealt with at Milestone. It's like, you
Yes,
know what? I'm not seeing what I want. I have to create what I want.
that's right.
And it obviously, Image has still been around to this day since the 90s. Milestone has still been around to this day since the 90s.
Listen, it's that 20th century grit.
Mm-hmm.
It's that 20th century entrepreneurial spirit and having the guts to do something at the scale that it hasn't been done before. When Todd McFarlane and the other founders got together and made Image, that was something at a scale that had never been done before in American comics. A number of people thought they were crazy, leaving Marvel from working on the top properties, which you helped make the top properties,
Mm-hmm.
to go off on your own. That was madness.
Mm-hmm.
The Milestone founders coming together, and Dennis was making a lot of money working on Batman at DC Comics. Dwayne was writing Deathlock and different things at Marvel. Derek T. Dingle was at Black Enterprise magazine. Michael Davis was in Hollywood. You know, coming together and making Milestone the first truly diverse, multicultural, multisexual superhero universe. People thought they were insane,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it's the people who bet on themselves at a level that most people would call insanity. Those are the people who change things.
It's true. And it's funny because that's now the second time that you brought up a situation where somebody who pushed for a historical moment of change was seen as, seen as divisive because they were
Yes,
going completely left to the narrative. You said
that's
it with
right.
Marcus Garvey. You also said it with
Yep,
Milestone.
that's
Uh,
right.
and obviously, I mean, today was a day with the things, of
Yes,
course, that went around today with the boycott, of course, ending.
yes.
And so these are obviously a group of creators who basically got in line and started to uh, bring a lot of awareness to things. But, obviously with a couple days in the boycott, it was cut short. But there was a lot to be said towards that.
And also, here's the thing: the boycott was cut short, but the primary mission
Oh,
continues.
yeah, absolutely.
The primary mission continues, and let me tell you something. It takes courage to go against the grain and do something that most people won't do. And it takes courage to apologize
Mm-hmm.
and own up. So when I look at something like that, that is activism in comics.
Mm-hmm.
And activism requires sacrifice and risk and peril.
Mm-hmm.
And so these things have to be taken on. People have to try, and whether they succeed or fail, you have to respect the people who step out in front and say the dangerous things.
Yeah.
And so
That's where
when you
awareness
look
comes
at
from.
exactly, right, that's what wakes people up,
Mm-hmm.
right? So even though that in that particular form ended, how many minds were ignited in the last 5 days,
Absolutely a ton.
right? And the impression that is left in people's mind, that's not ending.
Mm-hmm.
That's still there. So to me, that story continues.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
All these stories continue. The fight for the power and agency of the creator goes back to 1938 when Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster created Superman, right? And sold it to a company at that time was called Detective Comics, now is DC Comics. And the story of Superman and what it meant for ownership and copyright and comic book creators is still relevant to today. In the case of Batman, the co-creator of Batman, Bill Finger, his name did not get into the popular language until less than 15 years ago, I think.
Yeah, you're right.
But starting in 1939 with Detective Comics 27, all the comic books, and I know this because I was a Batman editor, and you had to make sure this line was in the books or it was your ass. All the books say Batman created by Bob Kane. Now they say Batman created by Bob Kane with Bill Finger. So the story for representation, the story for agency, the story for entrepreneurship is the story of American comics, which is almost 100 years old when you're talking about the superhero comics.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we are not that far from, we're 12 years away from the 100th anniversary of the introduction of Superman in Action Comics #1. Right? And listen, 12 years can collapse like that.
Oh, of course.
So we're going to be there very soon.
But I gotta say, the actual workflow and significance behind American comics has always been a means of bucking the system. They showcase it in their books. They detail it in their companies. You know, it's almost a mantra where you see a lot of people who maybe, might be deemed as radical. They're not. They might be deemed as progressive. Maybe so. But they always see the future, and they know how to mold it. They mold it throughout their stories. You do it yourself. You mold it throughout your stories, and people have done a great job, of course, of introducing it into their companies. It's living embodiments are people, of course, like you who work with Milestone, and of course with Todd McFarlane, who basically created Image. Y'all are two living, breathing people who have bucked the system.
Yeah. And so it's great now to be able to work for companies that are bucking the system, to work for Todd McFarlane Productions, to work for Fairsquare Graphics. It's like, that has been part of my arc, right? My introduction to comics was in an entrepreneurial company called Milestone. So at this stage in my career, continuing along that trajectory after continuing to work with corporations, whether it's DC Comics owned by Warner Brothers Discovery or it's Heavy Metal magazine, the fact that I am able to work with these rebellious companies who will make dangerous stories, it's great. I love it.
I'm with you. I love it. As far as like the continuation of storylines that you have been able to put out, and actually having the freedom to just like create what you want culturally, create what you want as far as the identity profiles of some of the characters that you're putting in your books. Some people have literally a checklist of boxes that they have to go through in order for their character to even be shown in the mainstream. So imagine just working for an indie label. You get to create on your own. This is your thought process. You put it on paper. Do people like it? Do people don't? However it is. You're in the court of public opinion. It's your idea on a page. That's why I think the American comic system just stands out, because the indie comic space is just as large as the mainstream one.
It's absolutely huge. Absolutely huge.
Immense.
And yes, and comics is a collaborative medium with the fewest number of participants that produce stories at the fastest rate.
Yeah.
So there's something very robust about making comic books and getting those stories to market.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just something really great about being able to tell stories in this way. There's nothing like the comic book format. I will die on the hill that it is the best storytelling medium that humanity has made for itself, because it puts together narrative and imagery in a way that, it supersedes cinema. It supersedes children's books. The way that a turn of a page can manipulate your sense of time,
Mm-hmm.
send you back, send you forward. There's nothing like the comic book art form. And it's a global art form. It's well respected, whether you're talking about the European Union, whether you're talking about Japan, you're talking about Korea. Like, it's a global art form, and there's nothing like it.
Excellent. Excellent. So, as we're talking about this, Bloodletter trade paperback is now available in stores.
Yes, in comic book shops and bookstores. That's right.
I have mine coming in right now.
Awesome.
It hasn't arrived yet.
Okay.
I'm still waiting.
All right. Thank you for your support.
But also as well, Noir is the New Black season episode 3 is
Yes.
now the pre-launch is now live, and
That's
I
right.
think it's going to be arriving probably at the end of this month.
So what's going to happen is June 10th will be the day the campaign launches.
Okay.
But now anyone can go to Kickstarter and they can pre-register.
Mm-hmm.
And pre-registering is very important, because the more people that pre-register, the more people who will be made aware first hour the campaign is launched, right? And one of the great things about Kickstarter campaigns is there are incentives for being an early backer. And being an early backer,
Oh yeah.
you have the power to shape the momentum and potential success of the campaign. And I say that as someone who, I continue to back Kickstarter campaigns. I like the early bird specials. I like being there within the first 24 to 48 hours. And I like the fact that Kickstarter allows publishers to make the kind of books that most publishers would consider risky, but they get to do them. And that's what Noir is the New Black is. Noir is the New Black is a very distinctive type of title that some people may think on paper could not be successful, but look at what Fairsquare Graphics has accomplished with it. So it bucks conventional wisdom.
Absolutely.
With the help of the people.
Yep. And so if you hadn't had a chance to, of course, read Noir is the New Black, either the first two episodes in the series, 1 and 2, you get, of course, the Winterfields first part, second part. The final, of course, is going to be released very soon, come June 10th when this one does release. And obviously, we will probably get it in our hands probably a couple months after that. But I've had a chance, of course, to read the first 2 iterations of this particular book, and it has been fantastic.
Thank you.
Illidge, it's always good to talk to you. I feel it's always a pleasure for me to talk to you. Wealth of knowledge. I appreciate you always basically giving the type of gems that are needed within this comic book realm. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And obviously, of course, as well, Bloodletter live in stores right now.
Thank you so much. It's always good talking with you as well. And listen, these stories that we make, they entertain and they touch people's lives. So being able to have these conversations is part of what it's all about.
That's right. That's right. So, of course, for everybody here at the Facts Project, Joseph Illidge, we talked about Bloodletter, of course, live in stores, and as well, Noir is the New Black, episode 3 will be ready to go June 10th. So be out on Kickstarter for when that does arrive. Obviously, from everybody here at the Facts Project, my name is James Boyce. We'll see you guys next week on the channel. All right. So we are out.